What's going on, everybody? You're listening to the Point NHL Recap Show. I'm Pascal Pryor, joined by Mark Howard. As always, just to start off though, Mark, how you doing, buddy? I know you had a little vacation. How you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, buddy. Vacation was all right for sure. Costa Rica, definitely a nice place to visit. Pretty pumped though. We're getting into like the last part of the season here, like probably like 6 weeks left of games, and the trade deadline's exactly a week today as we're recording. Had a couple trades happen the last couple days, and I'm sure it's gonna pick up a little bit more. It's usually, I feel like at this point we've had more trades. Like the deadline's been a little bit slower the past couple of years, but maybe it'll be different this year, and a lot of moves will happen like right before or on deadline day. So I'm pretty pumped up, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm fired up, dude. I'm ready to record, dude. I got the Zen in right now. You know, I got my nicotine for the episode, so I'm absolutely rolling. I think we should get right into the big news though, because this was massive news. I know we were texting about this in our group chat as soon as we saw this the other night. It has to do with Vancouver Canucks Elias Pettersson. According to multiple sources, the Vancouver Canucks and Carolina Hurricanes had some pretty extensive discussions about Elias Pettersson that advanced to a stage where both the Canucks and Pettersson need to make serious decisions about where their relationship is going to be headed. Pettersson, he's on the last year of his deal. He's currently making about $7.35 million a year, and he's going to be an RFA this summer. Just to start off, where do you think this is going to go with between the Canucks and the Hurricanes?
I don't know, man. So like this came out, but then it also came out after that he like went to Canucks management and was like, let's get a deal done, instead of, because he was really showing no signs that he wanted to re-sign, at least as of right now. I don't know if he's just like focusing on the season, or he doesn't really like it there. Like I'm not really quite sure about that. The whole Hurricanes thing was really interesting though, especially that like that got leaked. I saw like the main guys going back would have been like Nikash and Kotkaniemi. Man, I don't know about you, but like I don't even like talk about that deal unless Aho's involved. And I know Carolina doesn't want to give him up, but like, dude, you're getting a better center than Aho back. Like, I think Vancouver would be asking and wanting Aho, to be quite honest with you. I think it would make sense, you know what I mean? And then you can add on some assets from there. I don't know, man. I don't. This is definitely not a move that's happening now, I wouldn't think. Even though they're talking extensively, like, do you really think that like Vancouver, of where they are right now, would pull the trigger on this trade like in the season? He's an RFA, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's as much as he might not want to stay. It's like Tkachuk, right? Like with Calgary, he didn't want to sign long term, but you had his rights in his control still, and that's what they have with Pettersson. So I don't really understand how this trade would go down during the season, especially that Vancouver is doing really well this year.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you on this, dude. I don't think this is happening whatsoever right now or before the end of the season. Honestly, I think part of the reason why Pettersson was not really wanting to negotiate earlier on was because of how, like, where Vancouver, going into this season, where Vancouver was, like, none of us really knew. Like, a lot of us thought they were going to take a step back. They didn't at all. They've looked like an absolutely amazing team so far this season. But for Pettersson's point of view, it's like, do I want to go through like sort of like a, not a rebuild, but a reshuffling with this team while I'm in my prime? And now that they're not doing that, like I don't see why Pettersson wouldn't want to stay, right? Like
It's hard to think that he wouldn't want to stay at this point now, too. He seems like he's pretty close with like Quinn Hughes as well. They're kind of like growing together. The one thing I've always been curious about with him, dude, and this is just totally me thinking myself, like, do you think like him not getting the captaincy bothered him at all? Like
not
at
at all.
least publicly, it doesn't seem like it, but I don't know if like internally he is disappointed about that. You know what I mean? That was always one thing I was kind of curious about, but I mean, I'm not 100% certain on that.
I don't think it bothered him at all. Like, to be honest, I don't really even think he was like too interested in being the captain of Vancouver. Like, being the captain of Vancouver, like, that's a big media market within Canada. Pettersson, I think he's a guy that really likes sort of being behind the scenes a bit more. I don't think he was
Yeah.
really even interested in that, because as soon as that team's not doing good, like, he's going to be the one taking all the heat. Like, he's a Swedish, the Sedins are Swedish. I bet you he's like talked about the Sedins with it a fair bit, and like how their time was in leadership. And like, he still has an A on his jersey, right? So he still is very involved in that locker room, and within talking to the coaching staff and management about sort of like where the team's going, what their plans are. So like, it's not like he's not involved, right? Like, he's still fairly involved. At the end of the day, it just comes down to what letter you have on your jersey. And for him, I don't really think that bothers him whatsoever. And he's really performing this year and showing that it's not bothering him. But yeah, I don't think that, dude, I don't buy this, man. I don't buy this. The other thing that I found interesting, it's Carolina. Like Carolina, they're notorious for going out and trying to get star RFAs, right?
Yeah.
Like they did it to
I think the thing with
Konechny.
them is like as great as Aho is, he's not a full tilt superstar. And like Pettersson is at least like
Yeah,
if he's not one, he's pretty much there in my opinion.
he is
So
there.
I can see why they're interested in him, to be quite honest with you.
No, I can.
I think he's gonna stay though, to be honest. I think he's gonna sign an 8-year extension. I think he's gonna get a big number, and I don't think he's leaving.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you on that. Let's talk about some moves that have happened though so far before trade deadline. First one on the list here is the Chris Tanev trade. So the Dallas Stars, they've acquired Chris Tanev from the Calgary Flames in a three-team trade, including the New Jersey Devils. Calgary retained 50% of his salary. In return, they got defenseman prospect Artem Grushnikov, the Stars' second round pick, and a conditional third round pick in 2026. The way the 2026 third round pick works is if the Stars make the Stanley Cup Finals this year, the Flames get it. If they don't, the Flames don't get that third round pick. And the Devils, they retain 25% of Tanev's salary. In return, they receive Dallas's fourth round pick in 2026. Looking at Dallas's perspective to start off, how do you like this deal for Dallas?
I think it's really good for them. I think it makes them honestly like a little bit scarier of a team. I picked them at the beginning of the year to win the Stanley Cup, and to be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if they do so this year if they can get on a roll. Their forward depth has always been pretty good, to be honest, and especially the last couple of games, like seeing Stankoven up there with 3 goals in 4 games, like that's almost like a little deadline ad. You know what I mean? So I think the back end was definitely something that they needed to address, and they definitely did on that right side. I'm assuming he's probably going to play with Harley, and I think that's going to be a nice, like, veteran D partner to go with. You're really familiar with this guy, obviously, being in Calgary. He's not going to put up points. He's a very good shutdown defenseman. He has been for years. He blocks shots. He's the guy you need in a playoff run, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's a
And I think
locker
in
room guy.
Dallas's perspective, not giving up a first round pick is definitely ideal because if they do want to go out and make another big splash, they have their first round pick. And obviously, they don't really care about that 3rd and 26 if you're going all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, right?
Yeah.
I really like this deal for Dallas. We were talking about it before it happened. I thought Chris Tanev in Dallas was a really good fit. Honestly, he could have fit well on a bunch of different teams, I think. But Dallas, in my opinion, I think that one hole they were missing was a solid top 4 defenseman. They've obviously got a couple other guys that are really good, but I think this makes Dallas a really scary team going into the playoffs.
No, I agree with you once again. When you look at Chris Tanev and what Dallas is getting from him, you're getting a shutdown guy that can play in your top 4, a right-hand shot. He's going to play penalty kill minutes. And for me, the biggest thing is he's a veteran guy coming in. He's been on playoff runs before. This guy, he's a locker room guy. I don't know if you saw the quote about why he's wearing number 3 in Dallas.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's like half of 8.
It's almost half a number 8. Like, come on, man. You see that and you instantly fall in love with the guy. So for him walking into that Dallas Stars locker room, I think it's going to be great for the Dallas players to have like just this veteran guy coming in, knows his role, plays his role spectacular, and he's just a locker room guy. He's more lighthearted. The boys are getting down. He's going to cheer him up. I think it's a great move for Dallas. And with you, dude, like I really like this Dallas team, man. I can see him winning the cup. I have a futures bet on them right now, so I'm sort of hoping they win the cup. But I think they're probably one of the least talked about teams in the NHL. That's like a real threat of a team. Like when we talk about teams,
they kind of go under the
NHL,
radar, man. They
yeah.
really do. I think them in the West and Carolina in the East don't really get talked about enough, to be quite honest with you. I think this move, like I said, makes them scary. I think maybe they might go out and look for some like depth on forward, or maybe even look for like another like bottom pairing D to just kind of be there in case of injury. But I think they're set up quite nice. And honestly, even if they can hold on to this first round pick too, like they've been doing some good drafting as of
Yeah.
late years, right? So it's like even if you hold on to that pick and you're picking like 30th, like, dude, they got Stankoven in the second round, Ottinger in the late first round, like Robertson was a second rounder. Like Jim Nill and his staff have been doing some good drafting. So if they're even able to hold on to this first round pick too and be a threat, like it's a huge win for Dallas, I think.
Yeah, I really love it all around. From the Flames side, honestly, I love this trade too, being a Flames fan. I'm gonna be might be a little biased. Prospect, I don't know much about him. Don't know if he'll ever see the NHL. I don't know how much more you know about this prospect that we got back in return, but we got a second round pick and a conditional third. Like we got we got a pretty decent pick in the second round because like depending on how Dallas does, that could be anywhere between like 33 to 40, I'd think. So it's like you're getting a early second round pick, and then you're also getting potentially a third round pick. So it's like the Flames in this upcoming draft could have a lot of draft assets, and like who knows if they want to keep all those picks and really get a lot of prospects coming in. Do they maybe want to move around in the draft and use some of those picks to move up higher in the draft and get a player that they really like? So I really like what Craig Conroy's doing here so far with the Elias Lindholm trade and now this Chris Tanev trade of just getting as much draft capital as you can back, so you have a lot of flexibility as they go sort of into this. I don't want to say full on rebuild because I don't think it's going to be a full on rebuild where we're tanking, but sort of this reshuffle or retooling that the Flames are going through. Well, what do you think of the Flames moves here, though?
I think it was a little some nice tidy business from Craig Conroy. I don't really like think there's a loser in this trade, to be honest with you, because I think even Dallas, if it doesn't work out, like it was worth the risk giving up what they did. But getting the assets you got back is definitely solid for Calgary and Craig Conroy. Because the way I also look at it is like you got this guy for free 4 years ago, right? Like, and he's been nothing but a good asset for you for this team. And you got a prospect back. Honestly, I'm not too high on this guy myself, but Calgary sees some like Chris Tanev like attributes in this guy. He's very defensive, block shots. I don't know if he's ever going to make the NHL though. I guess that's going to kind of depend on his development path and how it goes. But I mean, they really like the player. It's worth the risk in their eyes. And I kind of like getting a prospect back as well instead of just getting like 3 picks and then you're just kind of guessing when you're drafting instead of having a guy that at least is in a couple years into the development and you can kind of see what he potentially can be. You know what I mean? So I like this trade for Calgary. Honestly, I would say give Dallas the edge a little bit just because they're getting a solid NHL player for the run. But like, I don't have any issue with what Craig Conroy got back, if that made sense. I think if he ended up getting a first, it would have been like a home run for him, to be honest with you. Did you hear about how there was a first on the table and they didn't take it though?
I've not heard about that.
So, but it made sense why they didn't. One team offered them a first, but the only way they were getting it is that team was going to be sending back a player with term. And I don't know if that was like a bad contract or what. And Conroy was like, I don't want to do that. And it makes sense. You don't even know who the guy is. So it's like, if it was a really bad contract, maybe it's not even worth it. You know what I mean? So it's more ideal to just get the second and the prospect, and then you just kind of move on from there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I'm happy with this trade. No complaints at all based on what I'm seeing with this trade. So I think it was a win-win for both sides, as you mentioned earlier. There was another trade that went through. This one's pretty recent. It was the Leafs last night. They made a trade right after the game against the Arizona Coyotes, pardon me. So the Leafs, they've acquired defenseman Ilya Lyubushkin from the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for a 2025 third-round pick. The Ducks, they're retaining 50% of Lyubushkin's salary, and the Carolina Hurricanes are going to receive a 2024 sixth-round pick to retain 25% of his salary as well. So he's 75% retained going to the Leafs. He's already been on the Leafs a couple of years ago, coming from Buffalo. I think this is a good trade for the Leafs. So you lost Mark Giordano last night to that injury. That really did not look good. And really sucks for Mark Giordano. But you're getting a bigger defenseman who's going to play his role. He's probably going to be playing on the bottom two pairings. So I like this trade for the Leafs. I don't think it moves the needle enough. I still think they do have to go out and make another trade to really continue to add to that decor, but I think it's a good start for the Leafs so far. What do you think about this, though?
I mean, I think it's a solid trade. I kind of liked Lyubushkin when he was with Toronto. I thought it was kind of a guy that they needed, and I think he actually like played well in his time here. I think that him getting like just under $3 million was just kind of something that they couldn't afford to bring him back. But getting him for like, I think it's like under 700 grand after it turns out with like the 75% retention. It's a pretty good move, to be honest. Like you're giving up a third and a sixth. That's not really that much. And like with like Zadorov's off the market, Tanev's off the market. I think someone else probably would have went out and got Lyubushkin, to be honest. So I think Tree Living was kind of at this point like had to make a move, especially the D's a lot thinner. You're losing Giordano now too. They've been playing with like 6 left-handed defensemen. I think a right-handed D was definitely a need. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes out and gets another defenseman though, because like I said, like they're pretty thin back there. Like once it comes playoff time, I think you need like at least like 8 caliber NHL caliber guys come playoff time. Like I said, Lyubushkin has not really played to his potential in Anaheim, I think, in my opinion. But that year that he came over when he was in Arizona first, then Toronto, he was like a really solid defensive defenseman. So I think it's worth the risk too with him being under contract next year. And I think it's going to turn out well for the Leafs, to be quite honest with you. I wonder if he's going to be a guy in come playoff time where he's like in and out of the lineup, to be honest, just like knowing the way Keefe is. But personally, I would have him in on that bottom pair at least, like come playoff time.
Yeah, I could see him coming in and out of the lineup in the playoffs. We look at what Keith did last year with the defenseman and how he was rotating them, 7 defensemen some games. Like, I think they're not going to do it as much this year in the playoffs, I don't think, but I still see him rotating their defensemen a fair bit through the playoffs and going to continue to add to their defensemen before the trade deadline comes. But yeah, for the Leafs, I like the trade. Even for Anaheim, you're getting a third round pick back, like, again, just on your draft capital as a rebuilding team. Similar to the Tanev deal, it's just a lot less assets and a lot less of a player. It's just a win-win for both teams. Both teams are getting what they really need and want out of this deal. So I'm liking what I'm seeing from the Leafs. Not only am I liking what I'm seeing from the Leafs in the trades, I'm liking what I'm seeing on the ice as well. Man, they've been looking good over this last couple weeks. In their last 10 games, they're 8-2, jumping to only 8 points behind the top of the division. They're looking good. The other thing I'm really liking from what I'm seeing from this team is Tyler Bertuzzi, the big free agent signing for the Leafs this offseason. He's starting to come into his own on this Leafs roster now. He's looking like what the Leafs thought they were getting when they signed him. Over his last 5 games, he has 6 points, including a hat trick against the Colorado Avalanche. What are you liking from what you're seeing from this Leafs team?
They're looking good recently, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if that like Ridley Gregg slap shot kind of like
Got him
lit a
fired up.
little fire in them in the locker room, but they've been looking really good. Only what are they? They've lost 8 of their last 10. Sorry, like 8 points back at the top of the division. They're definitely in the fight for it. I don't really see them ending up winning the division, to be honest. I think Florida's on like a heater right now, to be quite honest with you. Even watching them last night against the Habs, like they're bought into this really solid defensive structure that Paul Maurice has brought in. Like Florida, that was the first time in 15 games that they've let in more than 2 goals last night. So they were playing really good hockey. But like talking about Toronto, obviously like Austin Matthews has been fantastic. 53 goals this year. Might even eclipse that 75 we were talking about when you thought I was nuts for saying that.
He's not doing it. He's not doing it, man.
They're playing a lot better, especially even like Morgan Riley was out 5 games. One guy I thought that really stepped up during that time was Timothy Liljegren. There's been like some question marks around him being like a first round pick. He hasn't really shown that offensive upside, but I think he's been a really solid defensive defenseman, and that's something they need, especially from like a right-handed guy. Man, ever since I started buying into this $2 teen burger thing, the Leafs have been going on a roll here. So I took a break one day and they still won. So I just said, you know what, it's not me anymore. So I'm just gonna keep getting them. You know what I mean? But it's gonna be a big game Saturday night. They're playing the Rangers. The Rangers have been really hot as well.
Can't wait for this, man.
They've been very hot as well. And Reeves fought, what was it, for the first time since the second game of the season against Liam O'Brien on Arizona a couple nights ago.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Rempe Reeves fight, to be honest with you. Obviously, this kid's kind of came in. He's huge, 6'7", and he's been taking on the big boys, and he's been doing quite well, to be honest with you. It honestly seems like a little bit of like what we were talking about with Jack Guy last season when he came in. So I'm curious to see how he ends up doing. The Leafs are rolling right now, to be honest, though. I'm not really too happy about it, not being a Leaf fan, but I mean, you got to give credit where credit's due. And I think the one thing is Matthews, of course, is the goal scoring's happening, but like Domi's been playing better. Bertuzzi's been playing better. Like Bobby McMahon has kind of been in the AHL/NHL all this time. He seems like he's a bona fide NHLer at this point. So the Leafs don't really have too many problems up front. I think if they could somehow get like a really solid top six forward going into the playoffs, I think that would help them out a lot too. But at the same time, it's like if Bertuzzi's elevating his game at this point heading into the playoffs, that you might not even need that anymore. You know what I mean? So honestly, I think the Leafs are in a pretty good spot right now. Honestly, Samsonov has been playing better as well. He looks a lot more calm and controlled in net. Joseph Wall's back too. So
yeah,
there's going to be somewhat of a battle for that number one job, right? So I think the Leafs are in a pretty good spot right now. It's a good time to get hot. Like, I can't lie. You know what I mean? If they continue this for the next month and a bit, you get into the playoffs, you never really know what can happen.
Yeah, it's a great time to start performing in the NHL. I think it's setting up what's going to be one of the best first round matchups in the playoffs this year. Because as you were talking about Florida earlier, I think they're going to secure that number one seed.
And then you're going to get Boston, Toronto.
Boston, Toronto, dude. Oh, that's going to set up to be an amazing series. As you talked about Rempe, though, dude, this fight Saturday night, like it's happening. It's happening.
Yeah.
There's a reason Ryan Reeves was fighting O'Brien the other night. It's because he wants to get a fight and get warmed up before
in a while for him, right?
Before the title fight for him. You know, this is a title fight in the NHL, man. It's the up and coming prospect fighter against the grizzled veteran dude. It's going to be an unreal fight. But before we move on from the Leafs, we got to talk about Austin Matthews, man. What do you think he ends the season with for his goal tallies?
He's at 53 now in 58 games. I think he's gonna hit 70. I know 75 is obviously like a stretch when I was saying that, like, and it's not like it's impossible. I think he'll hit 70, to be honest. What do you think?
I say 72. He ties Solane.
Okay. I mean, yeah, he's been really hot as of late, obviously, right? Like, I just remember earlier in that season, that stretch. Well, he started off with back-to-back hat tricks, right? And then there was a stretch where him and Marner struggled for about 7 or 8 games. I think Matthews had like a goal and an assist in 8 games. And it seems like ever since then, it was just kind of like a little struggle, you know what I mean? And they've just been taken off since then. And man, he's such a great goal scorer. Like, I hate to, like, he's on the team that I hate, but you can't not admit it. Like, he's just so dangerous out there with the puck. It's like, man, he can have an off night and still bury 1 or 2. His shot's just that good.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. He's the best since Ovechkin that we've seen in the NHL for putting the puck in the back of the net, without a doubt.
Dude, and the thing is like Ovechkin never got over 65, like, ever, dude. So it's like
Ovechkin goal scoring also is higher though right now than it was when Ovechkin wasn't in his prime, I will say, which helps out a little bit. But
and the thing with Ovi, like, in the goal record is like Ovi stayed very healthy, like, consistently, right? Like, I would say Matthews has probably already missed as much, if not a little bit more time in his career that Ovi's missed his entire career. So, like, if we're talking about the goal record, unless Matthews is potting 70 consistently, I'm not too sure if he's going to end up hitting it or not. But I mean, it's a conversation at the very least, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I know Bucci, when Spittin' Chicklets was asking him about it, because he called Ovechkin breaking Gretzky's record like years ago, right?
Yeah.
And they were asking him about Matthews. He was saying Matthews, he doesn't think Matthews will break it just due to that injury history. Because it's like, you have to have the longevity, but then you also have to stay healthy, right? Like, you have to have the longevity where you're still performing at an older age, but then you also can't be missing games. So it's like, to do that, so hard, man. Like, with Matthews' prior injuries, I don't know if he'll be able to.
And the thing is, it's
stay
I wouldn't
healthy
say
for that
he's
long.
injury prone, but there was a stretch for a couple seasons where he was missing 5+ games a year, which is not a lot. But I mean, if you're talking about the goal record, like that can come into effect for sure.
Yeah. Well, and he's had wrist surgery too. So it's like
Yeah.
as you get older, if he has to get another wrist surgery or whatever happens with his wrist, it's like what happens to his shot when he's like 35? Like Ovechkin, like his shot hasn't really dipped down as he's gotten older, where like Matthews, you don't know if once he's in his like mid to late 30s, how much that shot's gonna change and not be the same as what it is right now. But yeah, dude, I think without a doubt he gets 70 this year. I say 72 just because I want to see him tie Solane as a that goal record, but I don't think he gets more than 72 just because like he's on pace for 74 right now, right? So it's like depending
Yeah,
on
so like he would need to hit that. He'd need 19 more goals in 24 games. Like that's the
that's a
pace he's
ridiculous
on. That's
pace.
100% possible, like easily.
It is possible. But the other thing is there's a strong possibility he sits the last game or two games of the season
Yeah,
because it's like what's more important, your how many goals you have in a season or going on a playoff run.
yeah, 100%.
I think we're all going to say it's going on that playoff run. So in the greater aspect of it, like if he's sitting at 70 goals and the Leafs go to him and say, "Hey, we want to sit you this last game or these last two games," like you're not going to say, "No, put me in," right? Like you're going to want to go on that playoff run. Let's let's move on to Austin Matthews' hometown team though. It's the Arizona Coyotes. They've been struggling as of late. They've lost 14 straight games. That's ugly, man. They're currently seventh in the Central, 19 points out of the wild card spot. Um, what's next for this team?
Man, it's kind of hard to like believe considering like they were at least in the hunt for
Yeah,
like the first half of the season. Like they were in the wild card spot. If not, they were just outside. But man, this streak's got to be tough for them, especially in this locker room, considering they've got a lot of youth there, right? And they've seen progression from some of these players, but it seems like it's kind of at least like stopped or at least taken a step back. They played the Habs earlier this week. They didn't really look too good, to be quite honest with you. I think it's just going to be kind of like a repeat in the sense of they've got a couple older UFAs. Maybe there's some interest around the league. I'm more talking about Dumba and Jason Zucker. They signed 1-year deals this year. Like, do you see a market for these guys personally? Like, apparently, like Arizona wants a first-round pick for Dumba. I think that is
that's insane.
insanity.
No,
That is honestly, I'd probably go for like a third, if anything. Dumba's specialty is the way he provides offense, and he's on pace for 13 points this year. It's just not happening for him this year, to be quite honest. Jason Zucker, I do like as like he could probably play in your top six, but if you're going on a cup run, I think he'd be like a solid third line guy. I think Arizona like retaining half. He's at 5.3. I wouldn't mind him on my team for just over $2.5 million, to be honest, as like a third line guy. If you're potentially have an injury, missing a guy, like I don't know, man. Like Vegas is looking for forwards. Like I could see like Zucker going to Vegas, like or something like that. You know what I mean? Personally, if I'm a team that's in the playoffs, I don't really see the point of bringing in Dumba. I just think he's kind of a defensive liability. And at this point, he's not really doing anything offensively. So it's like, I just don't really see how he's going to help a team win the cup at this point. For Arizona, though, like long term, you just gotta, they're obviously out of the playoffs at this point. You just gotta hope that you end the season playing some pretty strong hockey and then you're able to
yeah,
continue that into next season. But you really got to end this streak soon because like it's getting really ugly. And
oh
they
yeah,
had a
it is.
chance against like another Montreal was on a 5-game losing streak going into that game against them. They were vulnerable as well. That was kind of the perfect opportunity to end that streak, and they didn't. So I think it's got to happen soon, or it's just going to keep getting uglier.
Yeah, when you have that much youth and you want to do be in that right mix where you're not winning too many games where it's like delaying your rebuild and not getting you good picks, but you don't want to be at the point where they're at right now where it's like morale in the locker room's got to be terrible right now. Like these guys can't be happy going in every night and playing the games. When you were talking about Matt Dubb and Jason Zucker for sure, dude, I think there is going to be a market for him. Like this is a guy who's been on good teams. He's been on some playoff runs. He's going to be able to provide that depth scoring in the playoffs, which we all know is super important when you get to that part of the season. When you talk about Matt Dumba though, I'm 100% with you that I don't think Matt Dumba is going to go for more than a third. Like the fact that they're asking a first, dude, it's like what I want to know what type of drugs that they have that they think Matt Dumba is going to get a first because like, dude, that shit's got to be fire, bro. Like imagine having the hallucinations that you think Matt Dumba's getting a first. Like how many fucking years in a row have we been talking about Matt Dumba? I'm not trying to rip Matt Dumba too much here because I like the guy, but how many years in a row have we been talking about Matt Dumba at the trade deadline saying like, oh, he's on the top 5 trade bait list. This was when he was like probably playing his best hockey too.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get moved because no team wants to go out and pay what people think Matt Dumba should be getting paid. Like this, when you look at free agency this year, dude, nobody wanted to sign the guy, dude. It was to the
Yeah.
point that the Leafs decided to go out and sign the walking ambulance, John Klingberg, over Matt Dumba. That's how bad nobody wanted this guy in the summer, man. Like, there's honestly, dude, I'd even be surprised if he went for a third, man. I don't think he's getting moved at all. Like, what Gustafson last year when the Leafs brought him in, it's like that trade's sort of hard because that was for Rasmus Sandin, and you also got a first round pick from that though, right? So it's like
Yeah.
it's a hard comparable there, but like I don't.
I think that was to
what.
bring some depth on D to the Leafs lineup too, right? Like they had like
Yeah,
9D going into the playoffs.
that's sort of where Matt Dumb is though right now in his career, man. Like he's just a he's like a power play guy.
And the thing is, it's not even like he's producing on the power play
Yeah.
either. Like, the thing with Matt Dumba throughout his career is he had some good years. I always was on the opinion that he was overrated.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I just the thing with him is he's got a really good shot. He can produce on the power play, and you'll see him sometimes lay like huge hits. So it's like that's how he's getting noticed. But I just think that his value is just not that high. At this point, he's playing like he's a bottom pairing defender. And he's pretty much always been a liability defensively in his career. Like you bringing up
Yeah.
Klingberg, like I think Klingberg at his best is better than Dumba at his
Oh
best,
yeah.
to be
Easily.
honest with you. And at this point, I don't see it for Dumba, man. I don't know if it's to the point where he's on Arizona and like at least he's coming in thinking he's the best defenseman on the team. And honestly, he hasn't even proved that. Like I like other guys on their team over him at this point, but I would stay away from him at the deadline. I mean, if you're able to get him like half retained and give up like a fourth or fifth just to like get him for depth, I mean, okay, he's a veteran guy, but I don't really see giving up like substantial assets for this guy at the deadline. I don't think it makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not doing that at all. Especially considering, dude, that like this guy could be your seventh defenseman in the playoffs for some games. Like he's a bottom pairing guy, and when you look at the bottom pairing guys in the playoffs, dude, you want those shut down gritty guys. Like that's not Matt Dumba's game. So it's like even for
Exactly.
playoff teams, like where does he fit in their lineup?
And you got to
Uh,
think, dude, like Minnesota had no issue moving on from this guy this summer because Brock
yeah.
Faber's coming in, right? Like they're not like we're not going to sign this guy to like a multi-year deal to play like third pair right-handed D. Like there was no question for them to give him up this summer.
Yeah, no, he's had a rough trajectory these last couple of years, so hopefully he can bounce back next season, but this season it's not working for him. Let's move on to the Metro division. This division, dude, it's looking interesting coming up to the
Kind
trade
of a little bit of
deadline
a
here.
mess, eh?
Oh, dude, it's such a shit show.
For some
Dude, like
teams.
the Penguins, who are second last in the division, they're only 7 points out. So it's like, yeah, I don't know if I'd be buying if
Yeah.
I was them, but it's like you're not mathematically like doomed, right?
Yeah.
Let's start off with the Devils though. They're currently 5 points out of the playoffs with one game in hand. The team's biggest issue this season though, man, it's been their goaltending. When you look at their goaltending stats as a team, they have a 3.46 goals against average and a .892 save percentage.
It's
Not
terrible, dude.
not good whatsoever. To compare that to other teams around the NHL, the Ottawa Senators, who have been absolutely miserable this season, their goaltending stats are actually fairly similar. The Ottawa Senators have a 3.56 goals against average and a .885 save percentage. So save percentage is a bit lower than the Devils, but it's like they're getting similar goalie stats, man. And it's like you look at where the Devils are and you look at where the Ottawa Senators are, dude. If I'm the Devils, dude, I'm so happy with where I'm at right now that I have a chance to still make the playoffs. Because the Senators, they're looking at a top 5 pick right now.
Yeah.
For the Devils, though, if you're the Devils management, like Jacob Markstrom, he's sitting there waiting for you. Are you getting him or no?
I would if I'm New Jersey. I think the whole thing with that is, um, I think I personally believe they've waited a little bit too long on this.
Yeah.
I think this move should have happened like probably just into the new year. And look, they're not mathematically out. It's a little bit of an uphill battle, but I mean, I don't really know what they're waiting for at this point. Like, I don't know if Craig Conroy's price is just that nuts that like he hasn't pulled the trigger, or it's. On the other hand, is Fitzgerald nervous to like throw a first in there, considering like they might not make the playoffs? You know what I mean?
You already have
That's what I'm wondering about this.
They already have so many young players and prospects, though, man. It's like, dude, you like, if I'm a Flames fan, so here we go again. But Jacob Markstrom, dude, if we're trading him to the Devils, dude, I want a first and a decent prospect. Like, not one of their top prospects, but like, like some sort of prospect. Or I want a second and one of their good prospects that can play in the NHL right now. Alexander Holtz. Like, if you're the Devils, dude, like, I understand you might be high on Holtz, dude, but it's like, where's he fit in your lineup in the future?
The one thing I will say is if they go the route of not re-signing Toffoli, like he might have a chance at cracking the top 6 next year.
That's fair. You got Dawson Mercer there as well, dude. Like,
yeah, and they've committed to Timo Meyer and Bratt as well. Like it's not ideal. Like they're in a weird situation, right? Like Toffoli's on the trade board in the top 10, but like they're also talking about them buying. So it's weird for them, right? Like they had such a good season last year that their expectations are high now, but they've taken a step back, I think, defensively, obviously in net too. Like losing Dougie 20 games in has obviously hurt them a ton.
That's rough.
And I got to give Luke Hughes credit. Like I think he's been pretty good back there most of the year with like how much pressure he's had, especially like their power play hasn't been good, but I mean, you're asking a 20-year-old to come in and run your power play, right? I think he's done a pretty good job, even like defensively as well. What do you think about this mock trade? I was thinking about this. If they decide to go for it, like New Jersey, and buy, like with Markstrom.
They got to, man. They got to buy.
With Calgary sending, what if they send the Markstrom and Hanifin and get back, you take on Vanacek's contract, 3.4 for this year and next, and then you get Holtz and a first.
No, that's not nearly enough.
You don't think so?
No.
That's like, interesting because I think you got to think like Hanifin is worth a first plus. It's like I think at this point like you can value Holtz at a first because I think that he's on the trajectory of being at least a really solid top 6 forward. He's a top 10 pick. You know what I mean? I think he's looked actually pretty good. I was curious to know your thoughts about that. I mean, the Vanacek contract coming back is obviously like a negative for Calgary. So maybe I guess a little bit more can be thrown into the deal, but I wonder if they even want Hanifin now, considering he's expiring and they might not make the playoffs. Meanwhile, Markstrom has another 2 years left after this as well, right?
But yeah,
so I don't know. I was curious to know your thoughts about that.
If I'm them, though, man, I'm all in on Markstrom, dude. Like, because these goaltending issues, it's not gonna fix itself next year. Next year, you're not gonna get spectacular goaltending. Watch, I say that, and next year they are somehow gonna get spectacular goaltending after not making a trade.
See, the thing is, Vanacek, the only good year he's ever had was last season. Like there is a reason that Washington let Vanacek and Samsonov go in the same summer. They could see that these guys were not the future, and honestly, probably one of the better moves they made because these guys, Samsonov's playing better. But they're both not like showing they're going to be like starting goalies in the future, in my opinion.
Yeah, dude, like the Devils, they need a goaltender, man. Like not only for now, but they need a goaltender for the future as well. Maybe
Yeah.
not like 5 years down the road, because who knows what Schmid or Dawes could become, but like they need a goaltender for at least the next 2 seasons. And like
But that's
Jacob
fine too, right?
Markstrom's going
Because
to provide
Markstrom's
that. He's going
he's
to
two
provide
more
that.
years after this deal, right? Like, and it's like you can kind of mentor either Dawes or Schmid at the same
Yeah.
time, right? Like, and who knows? Maybe you can help if Vanacek's the backup. You might be able to help his game too. I don't know. Like,
Yeah, personally, I have no clue what New Jersey's waiting on while making a deal here for a goaltender. Because if they don't make one soon, dude, like they're gonna get to a point where it's too hard to overcome how many points they need to make the playoffs. And it's like
so
I know,
you're under the impression at this point, even if it's like they don't end up making it, just making the move for the goaltender at this point's worth it, considering like it's not an expiring deal and
yeah,
like you're going into next season. Because I'm sure they've kicked tires on Saros as well, but like I'll be
he's
honest,
not going anywhere.
I'm sure Saros is at the asking price for Saros is probably a little bit more than Markstrom. To be quite honest,
Yeah,
that's just my opinion. At least he makes a little bit less money. I'd say he's been a little bit more consistently better than Markstrom the past couple of years. Like nothing against Markstrom at all, but it's just Saros is
no,
my
I
opinion, it's
I
a
completely agree.
super elite goalie. You know what I mean? So it's like if you're not going for Markstrom, are you going for Saros or are you just gonna go get like some mid guy and like Jake Allen? Like
Which
I
doesn't
like
do anything, dude.
no, it really doesn't, especially when your other guy isn't playing good.
The reason I say they should get Markstrom is because like it fixes the issue for 2 years. It pushes that goaltending issue down the road for them. Even if they don't make the playoffs, dude, like they don't need another, like they have so many young players on this team right now. They don't need another first round pick. Like
That's fair.
when you talk about the Leafs and like why they're a bit hesitant to trade their first round pick, because they have no fucking prospects, dude. They have no young guys that are playing in their team. New Jersey, dude, like you got you got Hughes,
All their
you got
young
Luke
guys have
Hughes.
pretty much come up. Like it's yeah,
Like you got Luke Hughes, you got what's their defenseman?
Nemec.
Nemeth. You got Nemec. You got Holtz. You got Mercer. You can toss in there. Like
Yeah,
there's more guys that I'm not thinking about right now, but like their overall core is even younger, dude. It's like what's stopping you from trading a first or one of those guys I just listed? Maybe not the first two because like don't trade them if you're in New Jersey. But like Holtz or Mercer, like what's stopping you from trading one of those guys or a first round pick and going out and getting a goalie? Because like even if you miss the playoffs, man, your team's still gonna your young players are still gonna grow next season. You're gonna have goaltending. Even if they sneak in the playoffs, dude, like and get a goalie, who knows what type of run they could go on with Markstrom and then the playoffs. Like
yeah.
I don't know what they're waiting on, man.
And they're
It's
talented enough that I think like they can get like I still think they can make the playoffs. Like
oh
I'm
yeah,
not
easily.
and the thing is it's like they're out right now of the playoffs, right? And like they're closer to third in their division in Philly than they are a wild
And the
card
wild
spot
card,
as
yeah.
well, right? So it's like then you're getting a matchup against a number 2 seed if you get in, and it's like, dude, Philly's talking about like selling, dude. So like it's like who knows? They could sell and take a step back. It's only a couple games. Like I'm not too sure if New Jersey and Philly play again, but I mean, if they do, that's like the biggest game of the season, right?
Yeah.
So it's not impossible at this point for them to come back.
No, it's not impossible whatsoever. Like I want to see him in the playoffs because like I love this team, man. The Swiss boys are on the team, so of
They're
course I
built
love them.
pretty good,
But
man. It's been really surprising that they've struggled this much, but I can see it with their injuries and Dougie is a huge loss in my opinion as well. So, um,
yeah, it's been goaltending and injuries for him this year, man. Like Jack Hughes being injured, missing the time that
yeah.
he did, Dougie being injured and relying so much on young guys in your back end. It's definitely hurt them. Let's
And like
move
if they
on.
don't end up, sorry, I was gonna say if they don't end up making the playoffs, it's like going into next year, like they're a team that I'm probably gonna have back in the playoffs. Like
Oh, their team.
they're that good of a
Yeah,
talented of a team that I think they could get back in.
yeah. No, their team next season, even if they miss the playoffs this season, I'm saying like if they're healthy and get goaltending, they're a Stanley Cup contender.
Yeah.
Let's move on to another Metro team, dude. I think this is the most interesting team at this trade deadline. It's the Pittsburgh Penguins. Kyle Dubas, he's in his first full year as the general manager, or not general manager. I guess general manager, and
GM and like president of hockey ops. Yeah.
yeah, he just runs the whole franchise. He's pretty much like an owner at this point. But he's in his first full season there. I think they're out of the playoffs. They have 62 points, second last in the Metro. Pardon me. They're only 7 points out, but when you look at the teams between them and a playoff spot, don't think they're making the playoffs. They do have 3 games in hand, which does help out a bit. Mark, 3 questions for you, which is all turned into one question. Do they stay on course? Are they buyers? Are they sellers?
I don't think buying makes much sense, to be honest, at this point, especially they don't even have their first round pick in the Carlson trade as well. And it seems like San Jose might be getting the best case scenario out of this, considering it's top 10 protected, and they might miss the playoffs and be outside the top 10 in accordance to where they're picking in the draft. Man, this is just tough because the thing is, it's like I don't cheer for this team, but I love Crosby, dude. Like, yeah. I want him to succeed. Like, I honestly want him to get another cup if he can. But dude, this guy just fucking plays so well it seems like every game, every season. He's never been under a point per game in a season in his career, and he's getting no help at all, man. Like Malkin, dude. Like, to me, like, I don't know what is going on with that guy, dude. Like, he has taken a huge step back. Like, he's not really producing at all. Sid is just carrying this team on his back at this point. The one question with this team, though, dude, which is going to make a huge difference for them going forward, is what they're doing with Gensel.
Yeah.
Like, he is such an undercover, I don't want to say superstar, but man, does this guy not get talked about enough? I think if they traded him, man, they could get a fucking haul for him at the deadline. I think in his playoff career, he's like on pace to like score like a 40-goal season. Like, he's scoring like every other game in the playoffs. He was key on their cup run back, and I think it was 2017. I could be wrong about what year it was exactly. I don't think he was there for the first one, but I could be wrong about that. If he is actually available, and they're not going to re-sign him, like, there's going to be a lot of teams interested in him. And I think you're talking about a really good prospect, possibly even like a really good roster player. If not, dude, I could honestly see a team giving up 2 firsts. Like, yeah. I think he can make that much of a difference. Like, he's a first-line player, dude. Like, I think there's going to be a ton of teams interested in this guy. So I heard that he was offered 8 times 8.5, and he like laughed, like, no chance. Like, I'm not taking that. So I don't know if that's just like a first offer and they're going to keep trying to offer him and get him under control. I wonder if he probably loves playing with Sid, right? Like, who wouldn't? But the thing is, he might be thinking, well, fuck, in 3 or 4 years, like, all these guys are going to be gone, and I'm going to be here for 8 years, right?
The last 5 years of that deal would be miserable.
So I wonder if he's at this point, like, this is potentially the second year in a row we're not making the playoffs, and like, maybe he just wants to explore going elsewhere. And can you really blame him?
Not at all, man.
That's what I mean.
If I was him, dude, like, I'd look at going elsewhere. If I'm the Penguins, it's such a tough spot, man, because like, this is the team of our childhoods, right? This is them. Like,
yeah,
the older generation had Gretzky. This is our generation has Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Like, I think you got to move on and become sellers, man, because like, you can't become buyers. Where you're at right now, you can't, like, you cannot be buyers, because if you are buyers, you still probably aren't making the playoffs. What's it going to do for you next season? Next season, you still might not make the playoffs. And you're going to be setting your team up in the future to be the worst team in the NHL for 5+ seasons if you become buyers. If you stay on course, nothing's really going to change. You just become like a bubble team for the next 2 seasons. You probably regress a little bit too, right?
I think like Dubas, I think he's seeing that, right? And he's probably thinking, well, if we can't get Gensel's done, we can get a return for him, get a first, maybe a really good prospect or something. And it won't set you up for when Crosby's done, but I guess it'll make it a little bit less painful knowing you could have like a solid player in your lineup that was picked in the first round, right?
Honestly, dude, I think Crosby gets traded, but I don't think he retires.
See, that's what I was going to ask. So like, my thing is, though, is he's like a different type of guy, right? Like, he's so loyal. It's like, I I could see him wanting to go, but it's like at the same time, like I could see him like not wanting to go and like trying to figure this thing out. But like I don't know, like maybe 2 years in a row now, like he's gonna be sick of it. Like, you know what I mean? He's made the playoffs every single season besides last year. Like he's getting into the last part of his career. Man, would that be a story though if he's like willing to go? You know what I mean?
See, the reason I think he's willing to go, I don't think it's I don't think it's for him. It's going to be a losing thing, dude. I think what ends up happening and what gets him out the door is, I think Kyle Dubas is going to snap into reality and realize that this team, like throughout the rest of Crosby's career, however long that is, this team is not going to be competitive. And he's going to go
Yeah.
to Crosby and say, we're not a competitive team. There's I don't think there's anything the Penguins could do to become a super competitive team and put Crosby in a position to continue on with this amazing legacy and win more cups. I I think Kyle Dubas is going to go to Crosby and explain that to him and say, like, look, either you can stay here, finish your career here, but we're gonna be a rebuilding team, or we can move it. And I think at that point, Crosby will get moved. Like, honestly, dude, I think Colorado. I think he goes to Colorado and
Well,
finishes
obviously because
his
of his
career
buddy
off
Nate.
there.
The thing is with Sid though is like his no move clause gives him complete control, right? So it's like if he doesn't
Yeah,
want to go anywhere, he literally doesn't have to. So yeah, I mean Colorado's probably the one place because of his buddy Nate, like and them going 1-2 punch there, like that would obviously be ideal. And I mean, he's been in Pittsburgh his whole life, right? I'm sure him going somewhere where he's got a close friend, it's going to be very comfortable for him making that move. I mean, on the other end, if we're talking about another team that literally could use a 1C and a guy he knows, like would be Boston with
yeah. I don't.
Marchand. I don't see that as much happening, but I mean, it is actually a very good fit if you think about it. Like they're
Yeah,
lacking a 1C. It's kind of the last hurrah for the Bruins as well, with like Marchand. Bergeron's already out the door. Honestly, if Pittsburgh doesn't turn this thing around and able to get into the playoffs, I would like to see him moved. But I would also love to see him just play his whole career in Pittsburgh. But like I said, I hope he ends up getting another Stanley Cup. He's just so good still, man. He's not slowing down. Like, who even knows how much longer he's going to end up playing? Like, he could play till he's 40, 41. I don't know. It's like, it's hard to predict, but it's like he's literally not slowing down, man. Like,
yeah. It's what he's doing is insane, man.
yeah.
Um,
But like, so like, would you this year, would you just go and try to trade Gensel and get as much as you can? Because it's like looking at their cap friendly, like they don't really have a lot of expiring contracts. Like they've got him, they've got like Nedeljkovic is a UFA. I think he's been really solid. Like honestly,
yeah, he's been
out
good.
of anything we said before the year, or at least I said their season is going to depend on their goaltending, and it hasn't. Their
Yeah,
goaltending has been
it's been the
really
power
good.
play.
Their goaltending has been very good and they're still not in a playoff spot. So I don't know. Does the team look at Nedeljkovic? Do they decide to re-sign him? Like besides that, like besides Gensel potentially out the door, I don't really know how many other moves they have unless they're willing to move a guy with term.
Dude, yeah, I'm starting the rebuild if I'm Pittsburgh. I'm locking it in. If they don't start the rebuild, dude, like they're gonna be a team. Like once these players are done, they're gonna be a team that is terrible for like 5+ seasons. Like, do you
I
really want
honestly
to?
wouldn't be surprised if that happens anyway. Like
Do you
even
really
with
want to
like
do that though
Aaron.
for what they're? Do you really want to like risk that though for like where they're at right now and just like continuing to like miss out on the wild card by like a couple points for the next 2-3 seasons? Like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's
I don't
not.
know if it's worth it, man. I think we should move on. PWHL though. PWHL talk. This news insane, man. So they've released their playoff and draft format for this season. So basically, the way it's going to work for the playoffs, the top 4 teams in the standings, they're all going to make the playoffs, and then the first place team is going to have 24 hours to select an opponent to play in the semifinals, and the other 2 teams they're going to make up the other semifinals matchup. And then once you get into the playoffs, both the semifinals and the finals will be a best of 5 series. The higher seeds will have home ice advantage for games 1, 2, and 5, and then overtime it's going to be 5-on-5 sudden death. Based off what I've said there, Mark, how do you like this playoff format? I think it's quite interesting.
Dude, very interesting. And the thing is, like, the whole thing about picking your opponent,
That's really
that's,
cool.
I think, like, where it's like a storyline where, like, you could be talking about it for years to come. And just like, my question is, like, how, if you're, so Montreal's in first right now, right? Say they end up finishing first. How do you approach this if you're Montreal? Like, do you go at the team that you've had the most success against all year? Do you just go against like the last team to make the playoffs? Or like, do you even go a route where you're like less travel in the first round? You know what I
Fair,
mean?
because
Like,
their travel's not the best. The travel's
no,
not
and it's
like
like if you're
amazing for them.
Montreal, so it's Montreal, Minnesota, Toronto, Boston right now. Like the farthest team from them is Minnesota.
Yeah.
Boston's fairly close. You just cross the border and Toronto's close. Like, do you avoid Minnesota just because the travel's going to be worse? Well, they are in second right now too, to be fair. But like, you know what I mean? Like, it's really interesting to think about it. Like, and the thing is, regular season success doesn't always translate over to the playoffs. Like,
Yeah.
you've seen situations where a team is like 4-0 against someone in the regular season and they end up losing the series. Like, playoffs is a completely different like animal. So I am very curious to see whether it's Montreal or Minnesota finishes first, kind of who. I wonder what their thought mentality is about it. Because like obviously
Dude,
they're going to be asked, and I'm sure they're not going to give their honest opinion. But like,
yeah.
what would you do? Like, would you go against your best, the best opponent? Like, would you go against less travel? Like, what do you think?
I do a mix of the travel and who I think we match up against the best. Because it's like I think I'd take in the most account who I match up against the best, and then secondary be like, how's the travel going to be?
Yeah.
Because like you wanna play a team that you match up against good. The thing I find that's going to be sick though, dude, is like if you're the first place team and whoever you pick, if you get upset in that series, man, like dude, how sick would that be to upset the team that like was like
Oh,
I
I
want
know.
to face you first round. It's like, dude, like just spit in
So
their
see,
face.
I kind of like what the league's doing because like they're bringing in this league. It's hockey, right? But at the same time, they're introducing these rules that like people have talked about that would be cool that the if the NHL did that, and
Yeah.
they're kind of adopting that. And to be honest, I really wonder if a guy who has a lot to do with like the input on it is Brian Burke being in the
Oh,
PWHL,
without a doubt,
and
man.
him saying like this would be cool or like we should do this. You know what I mean? Because we've talked about this in the NHL. Like, how cool would it be if like um obviously 1 versus 16 is completely different, but like imagine one gets to pick their opponent. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're right. The storyline of an upset could be talked about for years, and it's like
Yeah.
also bring a lot of attention to the league. So I think them doing that's honestly pretty cool. I guess we'll see how it ends up working out. But I mean, that team who gets picked to play the first place team in the first round is going to have a lot of fire in them to beat that
Oh
team
yeah.
for sure.
Dude, the thing I love about this too, man, is like just look at how much like since the announcement, look at how much is generated just when people talking about it being like, holy shit, this is interesting. Like, of course we're talking about it now on the podcast, but even like at work the other day, I think we probably spent like 10, 15 minutes just like talking about this and like how we thought it was interesting. Like I bet you a lot of hockey fans, wherever you are in the world, wherever you're like hearing about this news, are like, oh man, that's like it's pretty interesting. Like it's generating a lot of talk for the PWHL, just them releasing this information about how the playoff format's going to be. I will say the only thing I'm not the biggest fan of about this playoff format is that it's best of 5 games
I
for
don't really
both
like that.
the semis and finals. Like if you do want to do it to make it a bit shorter and not compete with the NHL while they're in their playoffs, I understand that. Maybe make the semis the best of 5 and make the finals the best of 7. Because just like I don't know, dude, something about winning a championship in a best of 5, just like not the biggest fan of. I think a best of 7 in the finals at least would have been a bit better. But hey,
I honestly think that their teams probably think the same thing. Hopefully, eventually it can be up to a best of seven because that just seems like the best case scenario.
yeah, it, it it's just me getting nitpicky at this point because honestly, everything else I absolutely love about it. Even the best of 5, it doesn't bother me that much. But it's just the one thing that I did notice and was like, not the biggest fan of. Let's move on to the
Yeah.
draft format though, because this draft format, this is where it gets even more interesting. So for the draft format, the way it's going to work is once a team has been mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, instead of playing for like points in the standings, you're going to be playing for draft order points. The point system, it's going to work the same as for the regular season. So at the team at the end of the season with the most amount of draft order points, they're going to earn the first selection of in each round of the draft. So that's a little bit confusing maybe to hear, but it's like if you're mathematically eliminated right now, you want to start winning games. You don't want to keep on losing games unlike the NHL, because the more games you win, the higher up in the draft you're going to be, right?
And this is the thing that I think Brian Burke had a lot to do with, because he is an
Yeah.
advocate for like the draft lottery and stuff in the NHL and how it should be changed. The only issue I would have had like with it is if like one team was really bad and like they were way worse than any other team and like they're almost out of the playoffs already, and you know what I mean, they're going to start accumulate those points earlier, but it's not like that, dude. Like the New York and Ottawa have 16 points right now. They're both out of the playoffs. Boston's in, they have 18. So it's going to be a dogfight just for the last playoff spot.
Yeah.
So like I think this is really interesting format. Obviously the next like 7 games or so is going to be huge, considering some of these teams have 10, 11 games left in their season. But it's going to be really interesting to see what the points accumulation. I think the only scenario where it's a problem is if like, say you get like Boston, Ottawa playing the last game of the season for a playoff spot, and like that last place team's already been out for a couple games and they've been winning and they've already accumulated those points and they're kind of guaranteed that pick. I mean, you can't really predict that though either, considering right now that like 2 teams are basically tied for last place. It seems like a pretty ideal situation going forward. And like I said, these next couple of games, like especially for those 2 teams that are out, and Boston in fourth is going to be like huge, man. Like we're talking about a 2 point separation between 3 teams.
Yeah. See, I don't mind, like I really like this the draft the draft aspect of this, because like even if it does come down to that where there's the 2 teams like playing on that final game of the season for a playoff spot, and the last place team has had like 4 games that go towards the playoff, or not the playoff points, the draft
Draft. Yeah.
draft order points. It's like the way that they did it really sets it up that teams are all going to be very even. You're not going to have you're not going to have terrible teams. Like in the NHL, we have terrible teams.
Yeah. And then
Like,
the thing is, it's like it's avoiding tanking, right? And
yeah,
regardless, like the players are not going to play bad to tank anyways, but it just gives them more of an incentive, even as a fan of one of these teams, to like keep playing hard and keep winning, because that'll benefit you if you keep winning after you're out of the playoffs.
the other thing too is that like we talk about the NHL and like holy fuck, 82 games, like it's too many games. Some of these games are like they don't mean shit, right? Like, dude, every game in the PWHL season means something, because either you're
Oh,
getting points to
100%.
make the playoffs or you're getting points to decide where you're drafted. So like game, I don't know exactly how many games they play, but the final game of the
24, I think.
season, even for that last place team, is going to be very important. It's going to be meaningful. Where it's like in the NHL, like doesn't really mean anything for that last place team.
No,
Those
not
like
at
last
all.
couple games.
It's all the luck of the lottery, to be honest.
Yeah.
You gotta come last to potentially get the best, to put yourself in the best position to win that lottery. But I mean, the players are never playing for that, in my opinion, at least. So it's just kind of management, I guess, low key hoping in the
Yeah.
NHL. Okay, let's slip down the standings here. You know what I mean?
No, dude, I love the draft format, man. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be interesting to see even the playoffs too. Like I'm looking forward for these PWHL playoffs. See who finishes first and who gets called out. It's like we want to play you. That's gonna be
And the thing is, it's obviously like interesting for like the 2 teams that don't get picked, because I mean, you have no idea what that other team's going to decide. Like, you don't
yeah.
know who your opponent is until that team makes the choice, right? So it's not just affecting those 2 teams; it's affecting the other 2 as well.
Could you have a 3-4 matchup, dude? Like, does the first place team be like, I want to play the second place team? I don't
Yeah, like
think that's
almost like get it over with, like the harder
yeah.
matchup potentially. You know what I mean?
If they've been playing like, if that second place team's been playing bad the last couple games of the season, like I don't know. There's a world where whoever finishes first picks second, and then you have 3-4 play in the first round. Like, dude, it's super interesting. Overall, though, man, I think we covered a fair bit today. It's been good to get back in the grind. We're gonna be back in the grind for the rest of the season here, getting back to the weekly episodes.
I'm sure next episode will probably be mostly just like a trade deadline recap. To be honest, there's probably going to be a lot of moves between now and then. There might even be a couple more moves before this episode gets dropped. We did record here on Friday, March 1st, just in case there is a trade between now and when the episode gets out. So we only really had those two recent trades to go over. But honestly,
when
thanks
is trade deadline this year
for
again?
listening. It's next Friday, the 8th.
Next Friday, the 8th?
Yeah.
That sucks. I was hoping it would be like not Friday.
I think ideally we'd probably want to record after the deadline, maybe.
Yeah, we'll probably record next
we can
Saturday.
That out. Yeah, but we can figure that out.
Even Friday, depending on our schedules, who knows? Maybe we pump out a bit of content during the day.
Yeah, I might even get some like live trades to break down or something like that.
We can do maybe a bit of a live stream early on in the day. Overall, though, we're gonna have a lot more content coming out than over the last few weeks. Lots gonna be on social media as well, so stay tuned everywhere. And for this episode, thanks for tuning in, everybody.